Well, greetings to you, everyone. I've got a new guest today who I'm very pleased to have on. We used to work together. She was the editor of a magazine, which was for direct democracy, and she'll tell us a little bit about that in a minute, and various other things. And we're going to discuss a few things European with a French flavor, if you like. And see how it goes. But there's some quite interesting stuff I think we've got this morning, and I'm very pleased to have Miss Ferrari on my channel. Bonjour, Mademoiselle Ferrari. Ça va?
Your French hasn't improved, has it?
Ma petite Alsacienne préférée. There will
Bonjour.
be no more French spoken because she says my French is bad and it's spoken with a Belgian accent, she told me once when I was working out there in France, which is all too disgusting. So we'll continue, which I'm sure most of my channel will prefer, we'll continue in English. So where do we start? Well, let us start perhaps, as it's very topical, and a number of people on the channel has asked me to investigate this situation where it would appear at first glance, and it's not quite like that, that any dissent against certain medicines, as it were, would be verboten under French law, and you could go to prison. It's not quite as simple as that. And I've drilled down a bit. Miss Ferrari's drilled down a bit, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her views of this. And she's done some good research. And I'm going to just run a few perhaps questions or statements and stuff past her so she can give comment on that as well. So give us your views so far, Miss Ferrari, on that.
I think you're right to say that this article. I will speak about this bill in a second and explain how it came to the public attention. But you're right to say that it doesn't only target the mRNA, which most people were concerned about. So it's not that. However, it's highly, highly suspicious, and actually, it can really target other things, especially alternative medicines and scientific debate, you know, as a wider rule. So when I first was alerted to this, I had no reason to distrust the person who sent me the information, because he's a respected deputy, an MP, if you will, in France. I stood for him back in the days, for his party. He's highly respected. It's not a conspiracy theory. So for him to alert people on Twitter and to say that there is potentially a risk of anyone criticizing the mRNA vaccine to go to jail for a year and to pay a fine of up to 30,000 euros, I think I was right to be concerned and to explore the subject. So yes. So if you want, I had to dig up some information. It wasn't easy. And I came across these the famous fact checkers, you know. Anytime you want to, I know, aren't they annoying? But that's the first thing I found. It shows you how effective they are. So you Google something, and the first thing that comes up is a fact checker. So I thought, right, I'm going to read it anyway, but I didn't learn anything. So in the end, what I did was to call a friend of mine who's now working for an MP who actually worked on that specific text in the Assemblée Nationale, which is the equivalent of your House of Commons. So I couldn't find any better person, and he talked me through it, and it's really not an easy thing. So if you want to understand the origin of that bill, so first of all, the bill comes from the government. It's not a bill that comes from the l'Assemblée Nationale. And when the government wants to pass, a bill to the Senate or to the Assemblée Nationale, it needs to go through the Conseil d'État. What is the Conseil d'État? It's our highest administrative court in the country. So pretty serious people. And it's part of our constitution. It's the rule. So it went through this Conseil d'État, state council, if you will. And the people there said, no, it's inadmissible. It's anti-freedom of expression, etc., etc. I could find you. I have a little sheet here. Basically, what it said, it would endanger the freedom of scientific debate and the role of whistleblowers. So pretty serious thing. But the Conseil d'État only has an advisory role. It can't block any text or anything. But despite, and usually what the government would do is, okay, point taken, we're not going to take it any further. But they didn't. So they gave it to the Senate to examine. So the Committee of Law, the Legislative Committee in the Senate, examined it, suggested to delete that article, which the Article 4 in question, and I'm going to sum it up in a nutshell, that article, for your viewers to understand what it means. In a nutshell, it says that anyone that would advise someone that is ill or has some form of ailment to stop a treatment or to refrain from a treatment can go to jail. So that is in a nutshell, but but it is absolutely what it is, nothing else in that article. So in theory, what it means is that if I'm your neighbor and I suggest you, Godfrey Bloom, you've got a specific ailment, I said, hey, do you know what? Actually, my aunt had that and she cured it by taking excessive amounts of vitamin C or whatever, Now, I could be fined for advising you, so that is very dangerous. Also, what it means is that anytime you have a whistleblower that goes against a specific medication, and we've seen those guys, especially with the mRNA vaccine, these people can also be at risk. So anyway, so the Senate says, we don't want this article. We want to delete. We want to suppress it. Well, you can keep the rest, the other articles. I think there's 7 in total. But that specific article is wrong. Delete. It was then debated in plenary and voted. The majority of the senators said, we agree with you, delete. Then the bill was passed to the Assemblée nationale, and the same, to cut the story short, same thing happened. The majority of the MPs put an amendment to delete that specific article. But what happened, and this is the suspicious bit, is very rarely does the government ask for the Senate or the Assemblée nationale to vote again, but they did. And they didn't wait a week. No. They assembled all the forces, and so the first vote was on a Wednesday or Tuesday at 11 p.m. Very late, very, very late. So only the people that were determined to suppress this article turned up. You know that. You remember. You were an AP. You know how it works. Yeah. And these guys were very determined to delete this amendment. So it was, it was deleted. And what the government did was ask them to vote again the following day at 4 p.m. So different ambience, different time of the day. And they had 24 hours or a bit less to call all their friends in the Assemblée nationale to make sure they would turn up and vote in favor of this article. Now, we are in a situation where we've got 2 different texts. So we've got the text from the Assemblée nationale that has the dreadful article in, and then we've got the text from the Senate, which doesn't have the article within the bill. So the 2 texts are different. And so it means that they need to agree. So there will be a joint committee, I understand, in the coming weeks. We don't have a date yet. It's in camera. So the bad news is it's in camera. You've got 7 senators and 7 MPs. The good news is, the very good news is, the Senate is very right-wing, and a majority of the MPs that will be part of the Assemblée nationale representative will be a majority of people that are against this amendment. So the Marine Le Pen's party, for instance, would be, most. So it's very likely that this article is going to be suppressed anyway. If it's not, then considering the advice that the or High Court gave to the government, it's very likely that the same court will say, look, it's anti-constitutional, we can't have it. So to to end my little presentation, I would say it's very unlikely that this law passes one day. But what it means is you have to question, why is the government, why is this globalist government so keen to have this law pass, and very, very, very keen. I mean, you know, it's surprising.
Well, thank you for that, because that is absolutely top stuff, and I know my subscribers will be very grateful for that. It seems to me, and you just touched on it there, that we're talking about any form of medical dissent is going to be steamrolled out somehow, somewhere. And of course, we've got the WHO, the World Health Organization, is coming on, and which will probably override everything. So they won't have to worry about the minutiae of this kind of thing, because there'll be a catch-all WHO veto on everything, on medical dissent. And another point, certainly, as you well know, in this country as well as France, if you're looking at dissenting doctors, for example, like Dr. Cartland is leading the trail there, but of course he's got the GMC, the General Medical Council, on his back. They're saying, you are a dissenter, we can take away your license. This is no court of law. There's no 12 good men and true. There's no jury here. They can take away his license, and then if he practices, he can go to jail. So you have an infiltrated body like the GMC, which of course is packed by government placement, globalist placement. Of course it is. So he is beholden to them for his license to practice. And of course, this is the problem. So even if the law of the land doesn't say X for dissent, if the doctor dissents and doesn't get his license, he's back in the bin again. And this is the problem. And I just wrote down a couple of notes. Also, there was a phrase in there, was there not, which actually I picked up on, the current state of medical knowledge. There was a phrase in there, the current state of medical knowledge. Well, medical knowledge is fairly subjective. I mean, my website was pointing out the dangers of everything we've gone through, the lockdowns and everything, the dangers of all that over 3 years ago. So my state of medical knowledge was rather advanced on, for example, the NHS, for example, and it still is. And other experts like experts in Ireland and France and Germany, but they always say, no, just a minute, you can't do this, it will cause this. Or if you do this, it will cause this. So the medical knowledge was never actually definitive at all.
Well, that's why you go for a second opinion, isn't it?
Well, exactly, that's brilliant. Yes, you go for a second opinion, because your doctor doesn't necessarily know. And if he's a good doctor, he will say, I don't necessarily know, go for a second opinion, if you will. And this is one of the problems. And there's another little note that I made, but it said current state of medical knowledge.
Yes.
Well, look, 150 years ago, I don't know whether it was true in France or not, but certainly it was very true here, that if you had an anemic pregnant woman who was very poorly, the doctor would put leeches on her to suck her blood out. You know, the very reverse of what was good for her was done. But that was received medical wisdom probably 200 years ago, to be fair. And so what else do they treated some things with mercury. So medical knowledge is always, received official medical wisdom is always behind the 8 ball, by definition. And then, of course, you have big pharma. When did a doctor ever suggest a dietary change with something wrong? You go to see the doctor, whatever the claim, anything from cancer to tummy trouble, it doesn't matter what it is, he will never suggest a dietary result. What he will do is say, he'll look you up on the computer, and if you're National Health Service, he's got 8 minutes, and he'll give you a pill. And that makes him beholden to big pharma. Hospitals, training hospitals, beholden to big pharma. So the whole thing is deep state, the whole thing is globalist, and of course that's the sort of thing they're trying to put forward. But when you get fairly obscure legislation or proposed legislation that we have in France coming up, when you had to spend a couple of hours digging down, and so did I, to find out actually what the nuance is. The trouble is with the French, of course, they don't have a word for nuance. So this is the private joke, people. This is the problem that we have. Everything reverts back to deep state and globalism. And of course, as I say, I think the World Health Organization is just going to run over the whole thing, which is why, of course, in England, we're not getting, or Britain, we're not getting any depth of parliamentary debate on signing up to this. So the whole thing is going to be done. And of course, most people are asleep. Most people aren't interested in digging down this deep. You know, most people aren't interested in that. So it's done. It's a fait accompli.
Trouble with the French, they don't have a word for fait accompli.
So that's what we're faced with all the time. So and of course, if I may just go back to your magazine, the Institute of Direct Democracy, with all those articles which are coming true now, 10 years on, 11 years on. So the knowledge is there. It takes digging down, and of course, legacy media won't go near it. No legacy media is even covering this particular story.
It's interesting that you mentioned this magazine again, because I remember that something that you and I worked on, and back in the days, the EU was also trying to ban alternative medicines. And if you remember, we had this lovely lady that came.
We did have a charming lady came, didn't she?
A herbalist. She was a herbalist, and
Yeah.
she got really, really targeted by this new EU rule. I can't remember. It was years ago.
It was.
But also, if you remember, and I know you're not going to see the link now, but I will explain in a second, the interfaith things that we organized. Now, why am I mentioning this? Is because this famous article, this bill, was actually part of a text that was supposed to target what they call cultic deviances. Okay, so by cult, we can think of many churches or organizations that it is part of their faith that they're very wary of medicine or big pharma, antidepressants and other, and probably rightly so as well. And the fact that they compare people like, so for instance, I can think of, Robert Malone, or there is this French virologist as well, Dr. Didier Raoult,
Yes.
we might talk about him later. They compare, so they call them gurus. It's deeply offensive. So the French professor I've just mentioned, so I'm going to say his name again, Dr. Raoult, and is a very highly respected professor in what he teaches. I mean, he's been speaking all around the world because his knowledge on infectious diseases and how to cure them is so high. So what he did at the beginning of the pandemic, so-called pandemic, he cured. So he had his own department in a hospital in Marseille, south of France, and he cured the first patients of COVID-19 with a protocol, with a treatment that was a mixture of hydroxychloroquine and something else, maybe zinc, maybe vitamin C. I can't exactly remember the specificity of it, but he had a 90% success rate. That is huge. And we're talking that, back in the days, they were, the older segment of the population that was really affected first. So he was seen almost as a hero to start with. That was back in the days when the French media was open to scientific debate. I will leave that. You know me, I'm always very critical of France and the French media and the French politicians, but I will leave that to the French. They had a proper debate on COVID and on the vaccine. And I remember he was invited, highly respected. President Macron paid him a surprise visit one day with cameras, of course, because it looked good, because that was incredible that, everybody had freaked out about this disease from China. Everybody was dying of it. But all of a sudden, this French professor was curing people with cheap medicine also, something that
Yes.
really costs nothing. I'm not kidding you. I think his treatment really would have cost the state maybe €2 per patient. It's nothing. So this guy, if we had listened to him, could have saved lives and saved money. But anyway, he became then when the vaccine arrived in the narrative, if you remember, he became a persona non grata. People didn't want to hear about his cure that was working because they wanted to sell vaccine, didn't they? So he became a guru. And that is what the French establishment and the globalists are very, very scared of, are these people. Because Godfrey, if you remember, when they locked us down, what happened is that we had time on our hands to research, to make our own research. That's what I did. I'm sure that's what you did. That's what millions of people did, or at least, hundreds of thousands, trying to understand, thanks to the likes of your channel, John Campbell, is it John Campbell, or Robert Malone, or the Dark Horse, I think they call Dark Horse podcast in America. People were tuning in, wanting to understand what COVID-19 was exactly, what the risks were, and how to protect themselves. And all of a sudden, some of us realized that, the state is not here to protect us. It's just, and that is what the French establishment, that is what the French government, which I repeat myself is heavily globalist, are very, very cautious of. They don't want these guys to give you good advice.
Yes, it's a sad game. There's no question about it. And what's the view? I would guess under Macron, there's going to be the WHO thing is going to trundle forward. Nobody that I know in Western European politics really is hostile to the WHO power grab, for want of a better word. I mean, do you think this is going through? Do you also think, now you tell me if I'm wrong here, it might be my own perception, that nobody goes to the barricades as quickly as the French when they're protesting about something. It doesn't matter what it is. The yellow vest and so on, all this kind of thing. And it appears to me, and I think Canada has this in common, which of course has its little tiny French bit as well, they then stunningly vote the same lot back in again. They don't carry their street protests into the ballot box, or am I missing something?
No, I think you're right, but also I think you are probably overestimating, and I'm going to be heavily critical here. I was a bit disappointed because no one did lockdown like the French, or maybe was it Austria, or and then you had New Zealand and stuff. But I remember you had to print a paper every time you wanted to go out. It was proper lockdown, and then if you wanted to enjoy a social life and wanted to have a meal with your wife, or have a drink with friends, you had to show that you had been vaccinated. And you were stopped by the police whilst enjoying, having a look at the menu. You were interrupted by the police that wanted to show, that wanted to see a proof of your vaccination. So, and I would have thought that then the French would have rebelled and go like, hold on a second, no, you can't lock us in, or you can't force us, because it was they didn't have a choice. The French didn't have a choice for that vaccination thing. It was absolutely horrendous, but nobody really rebelled then. So I don't know. I think that we'd like to think that the French are taking it to the streets, and then, but in reality, I think it's a minority, and it just show, and as you rightly say, never translates in votes. And the best excuse, I suppose, is if we take, for instance, the last election where you had Macron and Le Pen, it's the usual same, crap. Oh, I'm voting Macron because I don't want Marine Le Pen in. It's as stupid as that. But look, they're paying for the consequences now. Is this going to change in the next election? I would like to think so. I think that people might just be ready now.
Interesting, because obviously, England just as well now, and it's just the same here.
Yeah.
Italy was also viciously locked down. and there were circumstances where if they didn't have this mandatory medical procedure, the police would come round and perhaps even take away your children. I've heard experience in northern Italy of that. It's really, and of course we've seen a pushback, have we not? But Italian police trade unions now are pushing back, saying, just a minute, what we have an extraordinary percentage of our chaps getting cardiomyopathies and all these other things. And so the unions, of course, this has been, now here's an interesting thing, I think, before we just close off. The absence of the trade union movement, certainly in Britain, and whether it's net zero, which is hemorrhaging jobs to the Far East because of the cost of energy, and mandated medical procedures, which people are actually resigning in care homes or various other places of work rather than submit to mandatory medication of any sort. It seems to me that where are the trade unions? That they've seemed to have gone. I mean, in England in the 1950s or 60s or even 70s, you wouldn't have got away with this. The trade unions would be standing up. But it seems that the trade unions, the Labour Party in this country, of course, is traditionally for the working class, or used to be for the working class. Now everybody's middle class. Nobody cares about the working classes. And there's definitely immigrants getting preferential treatment here, there, and everywhere. It seems to be a very Western European thing. So it's very difficult to hit back in the ballot box. And of course, the Conservative Party here are at an all-time low. They've slumped. And the alternative is the opposition party who's saying, yes, vote for us, vote Labour, and we're going to get more of the same. We're going to get, you thought, Greenie and net zero and all this, we're going to give you even more. We're going to give you more mass immigration, more of these things. So the choice is, there's no choice. It's unipolar. And of course, it's the same. It is the same, is it not, in North America? Is the real difference between Democrats and Republicans? I don't think so.
Well, that is the problem with any system that has two parties. It really is a problem. You were just touching on the French system. At least, especially with the last general elections, we really had a good representation on how the people feel. So we had a massive, the Marine Le Pen's party, Rassemblement National, was really, really successful with 89 MPs, forming with the what are they called now? They change names every 2 years, these guys.
National something.
It's so annoying. So together they really are, strong. And also we've got the far left, so the communists technically, which are quite, strong as well. And they often vote the same way. They often vote the same way, which means that it's a real force of opposition against the government. So that's our system. I will say that our system, in that sense, is probably slightly more democratic than yours.
Oh, I know. I entirely agree. I mean, I got elected for 10 years on the basis that the vote counted. They could vote. It wasn't a blue, it wasn't a red thing. It says, right, who's doing what, who's saying what. And of course, I represented Yorkshire, very well. I got elected twice on the basis that, the count voted. The number of people when I was on the stump going around used to say, the reason I'm voting this time is because it's going to be counted.
Yeah.
Nobody's interested I vote blue or red in general elections. So the system's better. It's changed. I wasn't in favour up until about 25 years ago, when I could quite see the obvious failure in the system of first by the post, two-party system. And of course, that's what America. In fact, it's another subject. We'll come back to it another day, I hope, if you can come on again and give me your views, because I did write an article. I can't remember whether it was for your magazine or it was for Going Postal, but suggesting that the natural way forward for the United States is for it to break up, because Texas and South Dakota have nothing in common at all, even remotely, with California or Minnesota. And the Constitution, which has been thrown out of the window, actually gives states far more power. than Washington actually lets them have against their own constitution. But I don't want to go down that route now, because
No, because it
both
makes
get
me want to
started.
sleep.
We'll both get started. But perhaps you'll come on again and we'll talk about other things. And certainly I have an American corner on my website where I interview, and I know you know some of these people, Pat Barron and other people, and Doug McGregor. So I have this corner up there, American. So I might ask you to come on froggy politics and from time to time, and or European politics, and we'll have a little chat about things and your view, perhaps your view of perspective on the English system from a froggy point of view. I do hope so.
No problem at all. I'll be delighted.
Super. Well, thank you again. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I'll automatically share it with you. So surprise won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.